Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Manga Recap here on the 31st of July of 2019. I am Nick here alongside Chris, and it is time to talk about shonen. I don't think we talk about anything but shonen really on the show, honestly.
Every so often we do.
Every so often.
Every
We're
so
gonna have to
often.
get people to send us some sort of long running series that we can actually keep up with. It's like we would probably be covering Skip Beat to this day if it were possible for us to read it somewhere.
Yeah. Oh God, is it still running?
It's still going. Yes.
All right.
Actually, this is a tangent before I go on my actual tangent that I wanted to bring up. Skip Beat was the very first recommendation that we took for Weekly Manga Recap. It was something we covered in the second episode or something like that.
Something very early on, yeah.
And that was like 7 or 8 years ago. So, yeah. Anyway.
That's egregious. All right.
Chris, I told you a bit about this after we went off the air last week.
Mhm.
But last Wednesday, the same day that we recorded the show, I was actually on vacation that week. I took a bit of time off of work, and the reason I took off when I did was because I got called in for jury duty on Wednesday. So I was like, well, I gotta, be off of work in order to go in for that. So I might as well take a little bit of this vacation time I built up. Anyway, but all I succeeded in doing was briefly messing up my sleep schedule. I did nothing during that time. But anyhow, I went in for jury duty, Chris. And I successfully avoided getting picked for the jury selection by just telling them what was true, which is I work at night. I am not used to being awake at noon. So if you choose me for this panel, I'm not really going to be able to be at my best for this. Sorry. And that was it. And they're like, okay, and then pick me. I had to stay there for the entire thing, as did all the other 35 people who were there. As if you guys have never been part of the American jury system, what they do is they've got a wide selection of people that they can potentially pick from, and the lawyers ask questions to help them determine who they will have sit on the jury, and the judge and them make the decision. So they asked a lot of basic things to eliminate people from contention for that, such as, do you want to be here? Which I did not. But also, is English your first language or not? And there were some people there who English was not their first language. And they're like, okay, we're going to, it was a civil case. It was not a civil case. It was a criminal case that had to do with check forgery. And so it was like, okay, there's going to be a lot of, terminology here that we're going to have to use. So if you are struggling to understand the terms, then maybe you're not going to be able to do your best, that kind of thing. Then, in order to get more into the nitty gritty of it, they had to determine okay, is there anyone here who has potential biases on this stuff? And then they were like, okay, we've got to make sure that the people who sit in this panel are on this jury are going to actually understand how the legal system works in terms of whether a defendant should be declared guilty or not, because there's the whole beyond a reasonable doubt thing, and then there is the burden of proof. And so the prosecution said, okay, listen, so here is my job. My job is to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. There is no burden on his defense to provide anything. I have to provide the evidence. So let me explain something to you. This is the example I like to use. If I tell you I'm going to give you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I give you, 2 slices of bread that have peanut butter and jelly in the middle, I've given you a peanut butter sandwich and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you're like, all right. Now, what if I give you 2 slices of bread with peanut butter on it? Then have I given you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? No. Okay. What if I give you a puddle of peanut butter and jelly with no bread? Is that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? No. So if I were to give you those things instead of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, your verdict would have to be not guilty. Essentially laying out it is guilt. It is definite that this guy is guilty, or you have to say he's not guilty. It's incomplete means not guilty. Anyway.
It'd be great if like you raised your hand and you were like, a hot dog is a sandwich, and they were like, get the fuck out. They're like,
we have had so many conversations derailed by the hot dog debate of 2019.
There's a coworker who has legitimate heat with me at work because of it.
Because you disagree over that? Oh, God.
Because I'm like, a hot dog is a sandwich. He's like, no, it's not.
Anyway. All right, so he makes his point with that. And then after he's done asking the potential jurors questions, the defense lawyer gets up and he asks a few questions. Then he's like, now getting back to the peanut butter and jelly sandwich example, let's say that I were to give you some bread and some peanuts and some grapes. Now, if the prosecution gives you that, has he given you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Like, well, what do you mean? If he has given you the components to make a sandwich eventually, then you can't jump to the conclusion that he's given you a sandwich. Wouldn't you agree with that? And they're like, no, I guess not. What if he gave you some bread and some crushed up peanuts and some smushed up grapes? Then has he given you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? They just go on this point because they're trying to find people who understand what the actual burden of proof is. And eventually, like, the judge speaks up and she's like, this metaphor with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, what they're trying to say is
even the judge is like, I've heard this shit
fucking stupid
so many times from this asshole.
Like, just the fact that they were both so into this peanut butter and jelly sandwich example, I guess that they were both just like, listen, this fucking fraudulent check thing is just so boring. It's almost lunchtime. Let's talk about food and get them to perk up.
Like, it's a moment with the judge is like, well, to move on to the peanut butter and jelly example, if you are receiving bread and peanut butter and jelly, but it's strawberry jelly, that is still the definition of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So you should still vote guilty in that case, in which case he does get the chair. But like, everyone just starts at like someone in the council is just like, so to add on to this example, if we're receiving peanut butter and jelly, but it's from the bailiff and not from you guys, that still doesn't mean he's guilty then, because we didn't receive it from you. So at that point,
what if, like, the judges from one of the other courtrooms is like, now to go on to this point, if you have a peanut allergy.
Yeah, like, someone raised their hands like, what about the crust? Like, the crust isn't involved in this scenario, but I don't like the crust. We're not actually.
What kind of bread is it? Is it white? Is it white or whole wheat?
Sir, I don't know how many times we had to explain. We're not actually giving you sandwiches.
Well, they keep on talking about the peanut butter.
So what? I'm just getting peanut butter and jelly shoved into my hand? That's disgusting.
Now, I have an important point. Did Onoki get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Because I don't know if that constitutes him getting his peanuts if he got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Something has altered the peanuts.
He just wanted the peanuts. He didn't really want them as a butter.
Also, I think that was more about him wanting his wife back. But anyway. So that was my adventure last week before the show. So,
well, I'm hoping for a lot of peanut butter and jelly themed metaphors from you this week, then.
I'll do what I can. We'll see.
All right. I'm excited.
Well, Chris, the first layer of bread in the peanut butter and jelly sandwich that is our show is the recap portion, weekly manga recap of is My Hero Academia. And we've got the conclusion of a flashback in this chapter, the seeming conclusion at least, featuring a very creepy-looking child. So this is chapter number 237, Tamura Shigaraki Origin. The last episode was Tenko Shimura Origin. So we see young Tenko after he has disintegrated, well, more gored up his family, let's say.
Except the dog, who just got paint spilled on him.
Covered in paint. Mm-hmm. Dogs are just as much a part of your family as, your dead grandma. Anyway. So Tenko's walking through the streets. He's got I guess it's like blood stains on his hands. I don't know. And his face is also messed up. And he's walking through the streets, and people are seeing this, ragged looking child walking alone, and they're just kind of ignoring him because it's like, I don't want to deal with that. Except until like an old woman spots him and she's like, "Oh no, are you all right?" And he looks up at her, and this is like, I better start seeing this image around and like as just like a creepy image kind of thing, or like people's avatar or something like that, because it's just so perfect. The look that Tenko gives her with his big hollowed out eyes and this awkward maniacal grin on his face. And immediately the other one's just like, "Oh, someone else will help you. Bye. I've gotta go.
I gotta get going."
Gotta be late. Don't want to die before I get to work.
Like, where are you going? Oh, places.
Canada. So Shigaraki observes in narrating this flashback that, there's bound to be more trouble in these densely populated cities, but one lost wandering child was just a blip compared to real emergencies. But even so, in a society overflowing with heroes, I thought maybe the reason no one helped me was because I was being punished for killing my family. If only back then someone had reached out to help. Yeah, so Shigaraki's nuts. I wanted to make that clear. It's definitely, I'm sure, contributed to his state that people saw this creepy kid and were like, "Oh, yeah, I'm sure someone else will help him." Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing, the bystander effect. But still,
it's a different scenario though than if he was a kid who was like normally in this sort of scenario you want to place the onus of villainy on the public. Whereas here, I'm like 100% sympathizing with everybody else. I was like, yeah, it's this kid with very creepy eyes who isn't saying anything at all, and he's covered in blood. Like, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna hang. Like, it's like, why didn't Superman save me? I'd be like, I don't know, maybe because you looked fucking terrifying at the time, dude. Like, not for nothing, but.
And imagine, if Chris, let's say we don't know each other, and you spot me on the side of the road.
Who are you? Where am I? What's this show?
I'm like, beaten up, covered in rags and stuff. First of all, you're probably going to ignore me even if you don't see anything particularly weird about me, because, raggedy looking people on the street are scary. I'm sorry. They just are. I don't want to get involved with them because I have, gotten involved with homeless people in the past, and then had to have the very awkward moment of like, yeah, you need to leave me alone, Anyway, but then, let's say that you have a particularly big heart that day and you're like, I will save this person. I will do whatever it takes. I will put them in get them to a soup kitchen. I will take them to the hospital or something like that. And you're like, hey man, are you all right? And I just look at you like, now, maybe you've got a particularly, understanding attitude about that kind of thing, but I kind of hope that you don't feel more like helping me after you see me look at you like that.
I'm like, well, now that I've seen into his soul, I know that he's someone I could trust.
Absolutely. This reminds me of Ibitsu, that one horror manga we read a long time ago with the homeless girl who killed people with Triple H's hammer. Anyway. And every time there was like, oh, if you approach her, then no matter what you say, then she'll hunt you down and try to be your little sister and kill you. It's like, yeah, don't approach creepy looking children on the street. Bad things happen. That's what manga's taught me.
That's just fact. I mean, you can't really dispute that. Like, that's just simply how it works.
But Chris, eventually someone did reach out to help Shigaraki. And of course, it was All for One. And Shigaraki thinks to himself, oh, if only someone had, helped me, then maybe the itch would have gone away for good. And he forgets everything, I guess, at this point. Maybe he doesn't forget them until later, actually. He mentions forgetting memories up to this point. And so we see All for One and the professor, with Shigaraki, who has thrown up again. And All For One explains that you have an impulse inside of you to destroy, and you can't control it. It is bursting out of you, and the itching is your body, is basically that impulse letting your body know. So you don't need to endure that impulse. It's not necessarily a bad thing. A little bit later, we see him getting beaten up by some kids because he looks creepy, and they're like, fuck this guy. Also, we're probably drunk. He has an impulse, of course, to destroy them, but he resists it. And All For One's like, you shouldn't resist that impulse, or the only one to suffer will be you. And we see young Tenko on the ground, like writhing in agony, scratching at his own face and stuff. He's clearly suffering from this supposed impulse that he has. And All For One asks him, what do you want to do? And Tenko admits that he wants to kill the two guys who just hurt him. He's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like this bad feeling is filling me up, and I can't stop it. I can't hold it back. And he reaches out for this one of the hands that has been prepared for him by All For One and the professor, and he disintegrates it. And All For One says, well, then try your best. And Shigaraki ends up going out on the street, covered in the hands, looking basically like a small version of his current look. And he goes and he finds those two thugs and he kills them. All For One and the professor are watching him from a rooftop. And the professor's like, I thought he'd lost his memories. And All For One says, not lost, only shut away, but they remain within him. His family's hands will restrain him, keep him in check. With his memories locked away, it's only his unstable emotions that float to the surface. And that unease, look, he's keeping his own quirk in check. I will cultivate him, encourage him, and he will be the symbol of fear who lusts for destruction. And we've just witnessed his first major step down that path. And Tenko says to himself as he's covered in the hands that he feels awful, yet he also feels calmed, and as if he's allowed to do whatever he wants. All For One presents the two thugs he killed, their hands to him, as well as an additional hand to replace the one that he, disintegrated before when he reached out for it. And now he's, dressed in all the hands and stuff, looking really, probably actually creepier than normal because he's so much smaller, so the hands look bigger on him. And All For One addresses him as Tomura Shigaraki. And Shigaraki's like, what does that mean, basically? And All For One says, it's from the verb tomurao, meaning to mourn. Tenko Shimura is no more. You're reborn now as one who beckons acts of mourning into this world of ours. And then he asks, well, what about Shigaraki? And All For One says,
that's a cool name.
This is a cool name.
It sounded really
always thought I'd have a friend named Shigaraki. All For One says, that's my last name. So now Shigaraki remembers all this stuff. And so Shigaraki's like, yeah, back then I wanted to murder my father, so I did, and my heart became unencumbered as I watched the rest of my family crumble. That wasn't a tragedy. We cut over to Gigantomachia, who is rampaging through buildings and people alike. And Twice is like, oh, wow. But yeah, and he's going right for Shigaraki. Sweet. But Mr. Compress shouts over to Dabi, who's still fighting the ice guy, and is like, that guy was just toying with us for months. He's unstoppable, and he's going straight for Shigaraki. He's going to kill him. We've got to go and help him. We've got to finish our own fights and help him. And Spinner shouts out for Shigaraki, but Shigaraki takes one of the hands from his body, and he says, these sorts of things, too, are all unnecessary, and disintegrates it in his hand. So it seems as though Shigaraki's true power has awakened from all of this. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so one of the cool things is like seeing how all these hands play into sort of what his identity was, and now that he's no longer being literally kind of held back, we can see that there's a physical power. There's a part of me, though, that is wondering if there's going to be an artistic change with him going forward, because those hands were iconically the Shigaraki look.
Yeah.
And without them, he doesn't come across particularly visually interesting. So I'm wondering,
he's just a guy with white hair. Right?
I'm wondering if we're going to get something else or something new to him after this. I mean, that's kind of thinking far in the future. because who knows, this fight ends, and then it's like him being like, now that we have Gigantomachia on our side, we will rule. And he turns, he has like a propeller beanie and like 7 igloos on his shoulder or something like that. I'm like, okay, I guess it's a new design.
He just spends the entire rest of the manga just going, okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna hold my hand over my face and.
Oh, I can't. Turns out I can use the power on myself. Well, goodbye, everybody.
Oh. There's some interesting gaps in this flashback. Some little things that, when you look at them, is like, that doesn't quite make sense. And it seems as though that's deliberate to me. That Shigaraki, of course, doesn't have the full idea of what has been done to him in all of this. Like, he disintegrates one of the hands, and then that supposedly belonged to his family members, and then All For One's like, I have another one. It's like, what purpose do those hands actually fulfill? And Tenko shows up with near All For One and Professor, when we immediately see him really uncomfortable, throwing up, writhing on the ground in pain. Does he really just have an internal impulse to destroy, or are they doing something to give him pain and then just saying, oh, that's because you want to be a killer kind of thing? It's a lot of seeming unsaid manipulation going on in this that I think we're going to learn about later. So,
very potentially.
But yeah, it seems as though we're getting back to the present now, and Shigaraki seems way, way more powerful. So we'll see how that turns out.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Eden Zero then, Nick. Chapter 55, Black Rock, which I can only assume is a reference to Black Rock Foundry, the dungeon in World of Warcraft that is...
Black Rock Shooter, or yeah.
Oh, no, I'm thinking Black Rock Foundry, which is a really, really, really annoying dungeon to run through because I think they upgraded it, but back in the day, when you pugged it, people try to clear the whole fucking thing, and I'm like, guys, this is technically 3 different dungeons all attached to one another. We're not doing a 45-minute dungeon run so you guys can try to figure out how to get all these bosses. It's some nonsense. Anyway, guys, last time, Rebecca had her underwear stolen and then was given a very important B cube that had all the information about Valkyrie. It was given.
It's like insight into the universe, man.
Just put it on your tongue. It was given to her by a guy whose name I can't remember. It was like Peter Jeff or something stupid like that. But we cut back over then to Homura and Chigi, who, as I said, the mask guy is not yet done. He pushes himself out of the hole, and he's like, Valkyrie is that tan android, right? She's famous around here. So Homura's like, so you know who she is? Where is she? Where can I find her? He's like, oh, I know. And then he lands, and he's like, but I'm not going to tell you. So Shiki's like, haven't you learned your Yesin yet? And he's like, so you know those collars you're wearing aren't just for counting metal. As long as you got them, they mark you as prisoners for life. And we could just do whatever we want with you. So I could take away your food, put you in solitary, or I could punish you by sending you to the den of the most violent stones. Boom! And he teleports.
It's time to get stoned.
Yeah, it's time to get stoned. And he teleports them away to Black Rock's lair. And Black Rock is the lord of these mines. No one has ever taken that stone down, Nick. No one has ever been able to defeat all 100 monsters at once. And immediately, the guy with the mask...
It's not resolved in just this one chapter, though, so it's fine.
Not yet, but... So the guy with the mask sits down, and we find out his name is Garrot. Because immediately, a monkey mask guy... I know he looks... I'm trying to think what he looks like. And the only thing I can say is like, hey, kind of looks like Gazelle, the mythical king of beasts, the Yu-Gi-Oh card.
He almost looks like Jimbei, but like lion themed instead of fish themed.
I feel like there's a mythical creature that he's meant to represent, and I cannot, for some reason, place it. But anyway, he shows up and he's like, oh, you really shouldn't treat prisoners like that. And this new guy is Fuzaiten Baku, the Axe of Heaven. He's like, how long have you been here? He's like, oh, I'm very fast.
With a name like that, that is like proper Yu-Gi-Oh name too. So
that's true. So he's like, what do you want? He's like, oh, well, Madame Coronai's calling a meeting. He's like, well, you could have just fucking called me over the comm system. He's like, oh, but I wanted to see you. He's like, well, I'm in a bad mood. And so, what is it, Zaku? Baku's like, what a coincidence. She's in a bad mood, too. I'm like, very intimidating. So Shiki and Homura get teleported over to the cave, and they're like, oh my god, it's a cave. And then we see a big, cool, like, crystal, faceless kind of beast thing. And
it basically, like, almost looks like a dragon, but then it has no head. Its neck just kind of unfurls outward into, like, a flower shape. Yeah. It looks fucking awesome.
It's pretty dope. And they're like, oh my god, that's, it's not a bug. And Shiki's like, well, it doesn't look like a bug, so I guess you're right. And they're like, oh, that's the king of the stones. That's the big one. So if we beat it, then maybe our counters go down to 0 in one fight. And I'm like, of course you found that one. It's very convenient you do. So they're going to fight it, but it's actually a little too strong for them. All their attacks are kind of just bouncing off of it, and then it like shoots out a giant explosion. They have to run away. So they're hiding, but then it sends out like a swarm of bugs. And it's actually kind of a funny joke where Shiki sees them and they sees a bunch of bugs. And Homura's like, no, it must have summoned insects. I mean, they're not insects. They're birds. Birds, Shiki. And he's like, no, those are bugs. Oh, and he just passes out. So Homura's like, uh-oh, I can't fight all these alone. But then who should save the day but Rebecca? Rebecca's teamed up with the group again, Nick.
After so long of being separated.
After what has to be 3 weeks, the gang's finally back together. Remember when there was like a 3-year break between like when the Straw Hats were separated to when they finally actually got all back together again?
Yeah, Hero's like, come on, why bother fucking around wasting time for that?
It was like, holy shit, it's been like 2.5 years since Sanji and Zoro have seen each other again. It's like... almost on the same level. It's been at least 3 weeks since Rebecca has seen Shiki and Homura.
Admittedly, holy shit, Rebecca got to be useful for once.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Something is wrong.
Unless she actually plays a part in killing the monster, I will refuse to believe that Rebecca has any use yet. If she's just here to be like, I killed the mobs. Like, well, anyone could do that.
I'm glad that we actually did get a moment of this monster seeming actually intimidating. Like Shiki and Homura just have to run and hide from it because their attacks just are completely ineffective against it. But we'll see if it lasts beyond next week. Also, it's really this entire thing with like Homura and Shiki getting synced up. It's been done in such an awkward manner, and now they've just reunited. So it just kind of seems like it was all a waste of time to just kind of like get Rebecca on her own to have the whole humiliating dress up like a sexy magical girl thing, and that was it. But whatever. Honestly, this arc has been, I think, slightly above average for Eden Zero so far, just in terms of like there are a couple of interesting villain characters involved. There's, a cool monster thing. That's something above like what every arc I think thus far has had. So I'm actually kind of enjoying this so far.
I do think there are good things currently going on right now, and then some things that are a little bit rough. It's just the pacing's off completely, but
Absolutely.
Like the characters and the villains being introduced are generally interesting. Like I kind of like that Garrot is not just another creepy pervert dude who got punched once and then he's done for good. That we're seemingly gonna get more from him. Who knows if we'll actually really get more from him or if he'll just show up in panels in the future and then, I don't know, fucking Pino will trip him down a flight of stairs when the big fight comes on. It's like, there we go. He's handled now or whatever.
He falls into like a cream pie factory and like just kind of falls face first into every single one.
He like sneezes and falls backwards down the garbage chute. And I'm like, help me.
Falls from the cream pie factory into the fallen over rake factory.
I'm like, why were these two connected? Why aren't any of these rakes in boxes?
Okay. Brief note about Beast Children. This chapter is dedicated to our main character getting to learn who some of his teammates are, and I could not tell them apart by the end of
So
it.
there's like a big moment where like he's trying to, because they try to explain some of the rules of rugby, and they're explained that like kicking is a big thing, same way of football, where it's like if you have a kicker you can score points when otherwise you would not be able to, so it's really important to have a good kicker. So there's one kicker on the team that Sakuraba, is that his name? No,
Yes,
no,
that's
it's just Sakura, right? Or no?
Sakurai, I think.
Sakurai, that's it. He tries to get one member on his team who's a good kicker. Who
And he's like, no.
I'm sure we've seen this guy before, but we know no personality for him. So he's just like, sorry, I can't help.
Yeah, I've got an ingrown toenail or something.
I'm like, why is this whatever? So they don't get him, but there's another one on the team who's really good.
Now, when that happened, Chris, I have to say this. So the guy that he wants to get as a kicker says, I can't, I'm injured. And then Sakurai sees another guy and he's kicking a ball around. I was like, oh, he's so good at kicking. I'm like, isn't that the same guy who just said that he didn't want to be, that he was injured, he couldn't play? The guy I was like, oh no, it's a different guy who has the same hair.
The guy who's injured has a stripe in his hair, like a one little streak of a different color in his hair, Nick. I don't know how you could possibly get those two mixed up, considering there's like almost zero transition between the two scenes. It's just Sakurai walking through a hall, looks out the window and sees someone else who's already on the team. He's not recruiting new players. When they were like, we need a kicker on the team, I 100%, I was like, boom, that's where you get Sora. Because Sora would already be skilled at kicking because he played soccer. So I was like, that's 100% where you make that connection. And it's like, no, there's another player on the team already who's also very good. So they do a big 3-on-3 match at the very end. And I'm like, I don't know a single person who's in this match besides the guy that he wants to recruit and Sakurai himself. There's like 4 other characters and they're having interactions. And I'm like, I don't know any of you. There's a scene at the start where he's trying to recruit a player. And I was like, oh, is this a new person? And I'm like, no, I think this is also another player who's currently on the team, but we know nothing about yet. And it's fine because we still know nothing about him. Just that he's older. That's it.
There is one part of the chapter that I like, which is just the repeated emphasis on he just likes tackling people. If they're trying to explain to him how important kicking is, he's like, why would you want to kick? I mean, when you could tackle somebody, it's one of those things where it's like, kicking a ball gives you many opportunities to tackle people kind of thing. Explain how. Money can be exchanged for goods and services. Anyway, that's all right, but it definitely, this chapter kind of cemented the point that you had been making for a few weeks of like, I don't know who any of these people are. And like when we finally have a chapter of like, oh, we're going to know these people. Who are these people? Like, we keep on making comparisons because of, just the aesthetic similarities to iShield 21. But there is something about iShield 21 where the team of Inagaki and Murata were very much aware of something that was essential to its success. Inagaki said that Murata has the ability to draw very different appearing characters. So even if they're in a group shot, you can take one look and you can see all the different people who are there and know who each of them is. And it's the exact opposite in this series where, like I said, I see one character who's kicking a ball. Sakurai tries to recruit him. He's like, I'm injured. And then he sees someone else kicking a ball. I'm like, isn't that just the same fucking guy? Did he lie to him? Like, oh, no, that's someone different. So it's a problem. But more than that, it is just a matter of like, this series is like out of order in terms of establishing stuff. Maybe if it had more time to do stuff, then it would all come together. But it feels like it's not going to.
It's insane to me that we're 10 chapters in, and I cannot describe to you a single character on the team that's not the main character or the leader guy. I was like, it didn't take 10 chapters for us to get into Haikyuu before we're like, oh, Tanaka, he's an older student, but he's loud, he's abrasive, and he's a bit of an idiot.
Right.
Like, you don't even have to get into like the larger cast beyond it. You're just like, oh, here's one character besides like the main 2 fucking duo this thing's based on.
Yeah, and identify with. And he's established because he's going to, be their third member for this, little scrimmage thing that they're going to have. So we need to take some time to establish them. And there's all the stuff where, he like unlocks it. Yeah, like for team sports manga, you need to have very distinct members of the team established quickly at the beginning. So, anyhow, let's move on to Samurai 8, The Tale of Hachimaru, Chapter 12. So, last time we had Ao causing trouble. Hachimaru's father was able to use a device in his chest that seems to start disrupting his soul or something like that. But with 1/4 of his body remaining, he's just gotten up and he's continuing to attack them. And things are really bad for the good guys because the device doesn't work. Dharma is damaged and has to just sit there. There's a point about a third of the way through the chapter where he basically has to make the determination that he needs to go into sleep mode so that his system can reboot so that he can actually fight. Meanwhile, Hachimaru and An and Hayataro and his dad are in trouble. Hachimaru nearly gets cut in half by this guy's sword, and his father gets in the way of the attack, tackles him over, and takes the hit, and we get this big color 2-page spread of Hachimaru's father shielding him from the sword strike. And Hachimaru is immediately like covered in droplets of his own father's blood. So Floating Samurai guy is upset about that he's not dead yet. But he gets distracted by the other samurai whose name I keep forgetting because it also begins with H, hitting him with a machine gun from where he's still pinned to the wall. And he has to deal with him for a little bit. And then we get a flashback from Hachimaru's perspective as he cradles his father in his arms to a point where when he was very young, his dad had gone away to get some medicine for him, and he woke up crying because he was missing him. He comes back, with the medicine, and he says, "Oh, I thought I was, I missed you." And his dad says, "Hey, it's okay. I'm never gonna leave you. I'm your dad, and of course we're always going to be together." And he says, "Look, I know that your allergies. It's hard to that's hard, and that's your main priority is us just being able to handle that. But getting you to not be such a crybaby is right up there too." Geez, this guy's hooked up to some tubes, dude. Just go easy on him. But he says, you really worry me, and I can hardly leave the house, if you're like that. And Hachimaru said, "Well, would that be better if I take the medicine?" And so I was like, "No. If you want to stop being a crybaby, you've got to act tough. Tell yourself I'm not going to cry because I'm a tough guy, and I'm always smiling and laughing." And Hachimaru said, "So if I do that, you won't be so worried and you'll feel better?" And he's like, "Yeah, your dad loves you when you're tough." And Hachimaru's like, "Okay, then I'll give it a try." And so that kind of seems to be the emergence of the Hachimaru that we've got to know to this point. This guy who is very Naruto-esque in terms of putting on this kind of face of bravado and stuff like that. Hachimaru tells An to try and look after his father, and he apologizes to her for lying to her. And he steps forward to defend them. And we get a reminder of Dharma's words to him in one of his lessons in terms of how the princesses interact with the samurai. And he's like, listen, the important thing is who you act tough for and why you act tough. And Hachimaru realizes that after he became a samurai, he only was acting that way for himself. He only did it to show off. He forgot about that smile. And so he apologizes to his father, steps forward, forms his sword, which is still wavery. It's still imperfect. And he says, "I will protect the people here with me." He gets mocked, but he charges into battle. It doesn't really do any good because he is still completely outclassed. He gets knocked on his ass. He tries to charge back in. Anne uses her powers. Hayataro also rushes in and like start to form some armor around him, but Hachimaru gets this big wound over his eye. His glasses get cut in half. His arm is chopped off. And his father is watching him the whole time, fighting bravely. And he remembers, Hachimaru getting really into video games and being frame perfect at 120 FPS. he remembers him complaining over, having to take medication and stuff. And Hachimaru does seem to start doing better. He's actually dodging some of the sword strikes coming towards him, despite the fact that they're right in front of him. But eventually, he gets completely run through by the sword. It's actually a great visual because there's just this like spectral figure in front of him plunging a sword through him, and the sword stops just short of An and Hachimaru's father as he's standing in between them trying to defend them. The other samurai says, "Do you know why samurai must be tough? It is because, unlike flesh and blood Bushi, a samurai does not die of blood loss. A samurai's death only happens when he admits defeat. His body, forsaken by the warrior god, will disintegrate and die. No matter how much of a tough exterior you put on, if you do not hold powerful courage in the core of your heart, you will die. You have no courage." And sure enough, the wound over Hachimaru's face is starting to crumble, and his body is kind of fading away a little bit from that wound. But Hachimaru's father says, "You're wrong. Hachimaru, you're a strong boy." And Hachimaru looks back at him, and he remembers some more, and he remembers, his father encouraging him to act tough, and acting tough in order to make his father feel better. And he gives his dad a smile, and he says, "I'll give it a try. Let's go." And he hits the guy in the neck with his sword. And that's the end of the chapter.
It only took 12 weeks for Samurai 8 to start figuring itself out.
But holy shit, this was really good.
It's a good chapter. It's almost kind of unfortunate that it's good because in being good, it kind of exposes more of the problems it's had to this point. Where I'm like, you had a good story here of a kid who was very sick and was bedridden his entire time, and his dad cared for him, who has now gotten superpowers, and his dad's very worried, and there's more of a history there. And for essentially like 10 chapters, you just kind of farted around doing other stuff. Like, this could have happened in the first chapter, and I'm glad it did.
I think
because
so.
It gives us more time to actually get a relationship of Hachimaru's life and then his relationship with his dad, who we've kind of explored over a while. But there's also like just huge chunks in the middle where you're like, I don't know, we were kind of just like exploring shit. He fought a couple like nameless bandits, all these other sort of things. You're like, I can understand if you're setting up kind of a prologue where you're like, we're going to turn this kid from somebody who's a very egotistical, very boisterous, kind of annoying kid who then loses his parent and kind of like is brought down to earth as like this kind of quasi prologue. Like, I do like that idea, and this could still function that way. I just think that there was a lot in the middle that could have been condensed to get us to that point, and we could have gone from there. But like, I like Akka as like this antagonizing figure who, even after having been like blown apart, he's still like an intimidating enough figure that it's like, oh, he could still kill you even though he's basically just a torso, an arm, and a head right now. So there's stuff they're doing that's really good, and I really like this chapter a lot. Some of the stuff's framed kind of weird. I know some people are kind of picking up on it, but some of his like speech, like "Daddy only loves you when you're tough," could be like, I get what he's doing. It could have been reframed a little bit differently, but it's still leaps and bounds better than what Samurai has been. Now, that said, there are still some huge problems in this chapter, mainly being that this is still way too fucking busy of a series artistically. There's like 3 or 4 shots where I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea. It's like page 18. You see like Hachimaru, and it took me like 5 minutes before I was like, I don't know exactly what I guess he summoned samurai armor on his one arm to protect himself from being attacked, or maybe it's the dog doing it. I'm not entirely certain. I don't know why they need to be robot samurais who also have dogs that give them magic powers, and also have princesses that give them magic powers.
Chris, there's a samurai, there's the key holder, and there's the princess.
Like, I don't think we need like 8 different fucking little things here, but that said, I will take a good chapter where we get one. Like, this has made me more optimistic on this series.
I feel like this is the chapter that we've been waiting for. since, I mean, like, we've seen little flashes of promise, but this is definitely like, okay, this is, the heart of the series, what this is really about. And, I think that you mentioned actually a few weeks ago wanting to see if, like, there could be that connection of it's not necessarily between Hachimaru and An, but Hachimaru and his father. So when he cares about it, wants to defend. And hey, we got that. And, there's a lot of, good stuff. I like the fact that, how bad of a spot Hachimaru was put in. You see how beat up he's getting, and he, that visual of him fighting to the last, trying to protect the people important to him, even though he stands absolutely no chance against the superior foe. I mean, that's the biggest part of being a samurai. It's like, oh yeah, there's this moment now where it's like, you have misunderstood what being a samurai means this whole time, but now in this moment he gets it. He's demonstrating that quality, and that's very straightforward, character growth moment. But it's good. I think that maybe what Samurai 8's problem might be is that maybe people are afraid to go to Kishimoto as he's writing this series and be like, hey, can you, like, not just put all your lore and explanations of how stuff works in the first 5 chapters? Can you maybe, like, do interesting stuff and space that out later? Maybe they're just afraid to do that. Because of the clout that he has, and maybe that's what's going on. Because as this chapter demonstrates, yeah, he's good when he actually gets to the fucking point. So
yeah,
hopefully more of this in the future. Now, let's move on to The Last Saiyuki, chapter 21, Lost in Translation.
Good movie, by the way.
I've never seen it. I've heard good things about it, though.
Very solid.
Last time we learned that Ryunosuke's mom was the one who gave birth to Koharu. And Kei continues her explanation of stuff that happened in the past. I'm going to summarize some of this to basically say that we get an abridged version of the relationship between Ryunosuke's parents, how they met, how Ryunosuke's father, Gohaku, used to be more like Fukuda. He was, a true human. He was emotionless. He was super powerful, but he didn't care about anything. And when he was first introduced to Momo, he didn't really care. All that he cared about for her was the fact that they were going to have a child together, and it was going to be a really powerful child. But Momo was just like, so goddamn adorable and so looking like girl Ranma from Ranma 1/2 that eventually she just kind of like broke through his armor. And when Ryunosuke was born, he was like, oh fuck, oh no, I'm afraid for someone other than myself. And so he started to have actual emotions and feelings for other people. And so he stopped being so much of a true human, and so now he has the eye patch because he doesn't have his super regenerative powers. It's kind of a weird thing going on in this series that we've kind of like tried to talk about the point of like, is it actually true that like true humans need to be emotionless to be superpowered, or is that just a false thing, or is it happens again in this chapter. It's like, well, but Ryunosuke's dad did get actually weaker when he started caring about other people. So what's going on with that? Anyway, they got to the point after, Ryunosuke was a little kid, and they had to get to the point where Momo has to go and give birth to the true human. And we get this explanation that the way that it occurs is that she is sent to this hellish dream world. You can breathe power and decay just by staying there. And even if you die, your memories survive and you can be continuously reborn. But should you make any sound, the world ends. In the tale, it is said that Toshishun makes a noise in the third reincarnation, but what actually happened was that in order to create Kei, she didn't make a sound until the 12th life. Even if a scary monster ate her alive, or she drowned to death, or she was burned alive, or if her loved one was killed right in front of her eyes. I don't know how they're like able to see all of this happening, but we actually see that in one of the repeated realities of this dream world, she saw Ryunosuke being beaten to death with a baseball bat by his dad. Oh, good times. But she still didn't make a sound. In that world, the more Momo suffered, the more power Kei would accumulate. But meanwhile, in the real world, Gohaku's like, I noticed something was wrong immediately. It was said that Toshishun woke up in an instant after living 12 lives. Master Dotsu, this is taking longer than you told me. What is happening? It's already been a full minute. And Master Dotsu is like, Momo told me not to tell you, but the 12 times is just an approximation. As long as she doesn't make a sound in the dream, she won't ever wake up. There's no way to free her either. And Gohaku tried to stop it, and he was like, no, the real reason I chose you to be her husband was because that was her condition for accepting this role. You may have forgotten, but you met her a long time ago. You saved her from a monster and used a white Baku on her. But strangely enough, Momo didn't. There's a lot of stuff happening in this chapter. Can you tell that we're like 2 chapters away from the finale?
We had to get a lot out.
There was so much planned. This was originally going to take place over like 5 chapters or something. So we get this bit of Kohaku begging his wife to make a sound, and she still didn't. Eventually, Momo was taken to a hospital, put on life support. She still didn't wake up for 10 days. If you calculate the time spent in the dream world, she kept tolerating hardships for what could be said was an eternity. Then Momo said her last words to you, and her soul disintegrated into ash, and Kohara was born after taking in the pain and life force of your mother. With no feet to tie her to the earth, no hands to feel warmth, no vision to see illusions that obstruct the truth. She had all the components of a perfect, true human form, the most powerful K ever. However, something unexpected happened. And we see that the very first thing that happened when Kohara awoke from her egg or whatever was that she started crying and said, I'm scared. So, Chris, if you have no emotions, then you get more powerful. But then when you get super more powerful, then you get super emotions. It's a little confusing.
This is a logic that I can subscribe to. It's kind of like that episode of Fairly Odd Parents where Timmy wished away all of his fear and he would skateboard down volcanoes and other dangerous things because he had no fear. But the inverse, because the lesson here is that you have to have fear, I think. I don't know. Look, I'm bad at analyzing things. I don't know how we've been able to do a podcast for like 9 years and nobody's just been like, this guy's an idiot, because I'm bad at analyzing things. I've had so much trouble diagnosing what like the thesis of this series is trying to get at, because it starts to reach a point where they're like, technology is also keeping us from reaching true humans. And I'm like, I mean, do you just mean like phones and the internet, or do you mean like penicillin and shit too? Like, I don't know what you mean by technology.
Wheels, ramps. All right, I'm going to use my Nyoibo to defeat this monster. No. Weapons are technology.
You must defeat them with nothing but your hands and whatever comes from your body. So probably
okay, well, let me think about how it is. Strategy is also a human development.
You're getting further away from true
more developed than shit in your hand and throw it, then you're going to be a true human.
I'm like, well, now I don't even understand where I'm supposed to be doing. Or what did true humans do back in the like?
Morality is a human invention.
Contemplation is something that leads you down the wrong path.
I don't know. I feel like monkeys, even think about stuff occasionally. They have to make decisions. Like,
yeah, there's a monkey who's pretty good at Fortnite, probably, or something like that. So I mean, is that thing not human anymore now?
Yeah, he doesn't have very many subscribers. How great would Fortnite be if, like, during the World Championships they're going or wherever, it's just like a chimpanzee holding up the trophies instead of all these, freaking 20-year-olds who live with their parents.
Nick, the one who just won 30,000 or something like that was 16 years old. So you
of course
start going even younger.
He's getting all Fs, so.
But he's succeeding in the school of hard knocks.
Sure, if you call playing a video game Hard Knocks, okay.
Sure. I mean, hey, he has to get called the N-word a lot, like on a day-to-day basis. He's got to
toughen his up. Credit.
He's gonna go some real thick skin real quick.
All right. Anyway, so Last Saiyuki, there's a lot of stuff in this chapter. I mean, it's really just like, okay, there's an info dump here. We're getting to the end, and I'm just absorbing the information. There's not a whole lot here that's super compelling. There's some interesting stuff in terms of the dream world, but it really is like it's paced so quickly you can't even really appreciate it. So
All right, let's talk about We Never Learned then, Nick. Question 121. Sometimes the lovable beast causes a tumultuous pizza bet. So,
this starts off at Nanao Library, Chris. Do you think that there's going to be a whole plot about that it having a Zanpakuto that's not actually a Zanpakuto? It's a thing that's used for killing gods, and there's this thing that's a god, and
I literally blocked all of that out until you started talking about it, and I was like, oof.
There's a sniper, but
oofs.
then there's a sniper, but then he takes on a form that looks like an owl with a really long neck, but it's a god owl, and
he's still the best sniper in the kingdom or whatever. All right, it's fine. We got to find out what Kira was up to. So we start with Yuiga, and he's hanging out at the library when he gets a call from Fumino, and he's like, oh, hey, what's going on? You can't come today? She's like, yeah, well, sorry, I had to cancel at the last minute, but I can't leave the house right now. No, not there! No, please stop! And then it hangs up, like, she hangs up the phone, so it's Yuiga just being like, I think I have to talk to an adult. There we go. Sorry, my page wasn't going forward. So he goes over to Fumino's house to find out what's going on. He's like, I mean, how can I not? I probably shouldn't worry. I hope she's not fighting with her father again. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's possible, but you never really know. So the door opens, and he just sees Fumino's dad answer the door, and he is just like raining tears down his face. And Yuiga's like, oh my god, what happened? Is something happening? Something going wrong? And Fumino crashes through the door, and she's like, oh, come on, at least let me get dressed in peace. And she's not fully dressed yet. It's very scandalous. I actually surprised by the restraint used here, because she could have been in a much worse state of undress.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I know plenty of girls who, when their dad's in the house, they just, go around like wearing full dominatrix gear, like I know how teenage girls live, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, that is true. And so there's the moment of embarrassment because Fumino's like, what are you doing here? And then a cat jumps into Yuiga's hands, and it's like, meow, meow. And it's a very cute cat. It's disturbing because it has no pupils. It just has glitter for eyes, basically. And she's like, oh, so you're cat sitting for a couple days. And we find out Fumino's dad refuses to admit that he's allergic to cats because he loves them so much, apparently, that he wants to spend all of his time with this cat, but his allergies keep preventing him from doing it. So there's a whole thing there. It's very cute, but he's gonna head away. So he's like, oh, I was really worried something happened. She's like, nah. And then the cat lays down in Yuiga's lap, which is weird. I've never seen a cat that does this. I've never seen a cat that's like, you're a stranger. I'm just gonna pop down your lap and like belly up for rubs.
Some cats are like that, but it's very rare for it's like, oh, a stranger. Let me just
Let me put myself in my most exposed position. So he's like, oh, hey, what's the kitty's name? And Fumina's like, it's Fumi. He's like, oh, Fumi, what a cute name. And Fumina's a little upset because it's very close to her name, and she's like, it's just kind of embarrassing because everyone's like, oh, Fumi, such a cute kitty, you're adorable. So she imagines herself as a sexy cat girl, being
basically Lum from Urusei Yatsura.
Yeah, and she's like, why am I thinking about this? God damn it!
Because you're in denial over your own hormones. It's okay, like it's fine.
So she's like, oh, okay, well, I should make sure to send the photo I just took to Yuiga. And so she just took a photo of him, like, petting the cat. And he has, like, a very kind of, like, loving face as he's looking down at this cat. And Fumida's, like, staring at this photo. And she goes to tap the add to favorites button, which is kind of a cute moment.
That's cute. It's honestly one of the less ridiculous moments in the chapter. Where she's like, aw.
Yeah. And then Yuiga's like, we should get back to work. So she's like, oops. So she, like, drops her phone, which sets off the cat. there's literally a sound effect that just says snap. So this cat just goes fucking off, leaps into the air, grabs their notebook, and immediately starts running around the room, which leads to like a joke where like Uega goes underneath the table to grab the cat, and he can see from the other side of the kotetsu? No, Kotatsu, that's it. You can see from the other end, so you can see underneath it. It's supposed to be like, oh, he just saw something he shouldn't. I think we need to reach a point, though, where we can say just the fact that the lower half of a woman exists does not immediately make it sexual.
Wait a minute. Chris, I just realized all of these girls that Yuga spends time with, they're bipedal. They have 2 legs. They have legs with feet and toes that they have to flex and move in coordination in order to take them from place to place.
Like, I was like, it's
those
like,
hussies.
I was like, she's not like, it's like he's looking up her skirt or something like that, where like that suggests it's like she's wearing shorts. I was like, this feels weird for a moment for him to be like, oh, jeez, I didn't see anything, ma'am. I was like, you shouldn't. So she's like, oh, well, I'll distract the cat with this ball of yarn. Little did she realize this is industrial strength, steel-lined yarn, because the cat ends up tying them together playing with the yarn, and Yuiga's trying to like get free, and Fumito's like, can you stop doing that because your head's directly on my chest and this is weird. So
please stop motorboating me.
Eventually they free themselves and they realize the cat just really wanted food, which I'm not gonna deny.
Okay, listen,
a cat who wants food will do all sorts of heinous shit to you.
But that said, a cat will also do all sorts of heinous shit if it's not hungry. Yeah. Like,
I mean, really, it could be any sort of thing. So they're like, oh, cool. Now that, you know, the cat's kind of calmed down, we can get back to work. So they seem to be doing so. Like, we see the hours go by and they're just kind of studying. They're having good times together. And then eventually Uega kind of falls asleep. So she puts like a blanket over Uega, and she has a thought. She's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of like we're an elderly couple or something. It's kind of comforting. No, I shouldn't be thinking about that. And she's like shaking her head. And her dad apparently had played with the cat earlier with one of those cat toys that's just like, kind of looks like a reed with like a big thing. So the cat looks at her ponytail and is like, that's a cat toy, which again is a very cat-like thing to do.
I'm going to play with this thing that will inconvenience everyone around me, but fuck it, I'm a cat.
Yeah, I'm a cat. You guys are here to serve me and my entertainment. So it knocks into her, and she falls directly into Uega's lap. And he starts to wake up, and he's like, oh, there you are, Fumi. Such a cutie, Fumi. I love you, Fumi. So she has a very shy moment where she's like, oh, I should move, but maybe I'll just hang here a little bit longer. And then we end with the joke of her being upset about how she feels like she's betrayed Uruka and Ogata. But what we really end with is a joke that her dad came back with a bag of cat toys and is still just trying to play with this cat. Really, it should have just been an entire chapter of watching this poor guy try to play with this cat and just get sicker and sicker as a result of it.
There has been, I'm not sure if you've seen this. There's this manga called like Fukumaru to Oji-san, which is about this old man who adopts a fat, ugly cat and how adorable their relationship is because it's just this, you know, old widower and his cat loving each other. It's fucking adorable. So I highly recommend it. It's, I think it's like the Fukumaru and the Gentleman or something like that. Gentleman is cat. Anyway, you can find a bunch of it on Tumblr. So it destroys me internally. So
I have not heard of that one. I'll check that one out.
So anyway, this was prime material for We Never Learn is the best written series in Shonen Jump kind of thing. It's just so dumb. Like, it's not bad. It's just really stupid and has weird fan service in it.
It's one of those chapters where like 3 months ago I'd have been like, I don't know how, like maybe We Never Learn's going to end in like a month or two, because like we're already coming up on the end of the school year and the series can't go on much longer than that. We really don't have much time. And I forgot that this manga has the ability to just throw in bullshit like this, and you're like, there's another chapter, and I'm like, all right, you got me. I guess we could be here for another year and a half. Who knows?
Let's talk about Dr. Stone.
Let's talk about Dr. Stone. Something got stoned.
Character poll popularity results. Senku was the most popular. How could have seen that coming? I don't know what the hell happened to the rest of the popularity poll results, though. All we see is the top three.
Nick,
so.
They only voted for 3 people. There were no votes for anyone else. Not a single vote.
That is not true. Okay. So, Kaku has managed to crack open the concrete treasure chest now after she left it alone for a bit with their silent bomb thing. And so she starts digging through the fragments of concrete, and she's like, oh, that's going to be a little difficult for me to find. I wonder what the hell. And then she hears something crack inside, and she's like, oh no, did the contents get destroyed? It's probably fine, right? It's fine. And then she looks inside, and there's this glass bottle that has been busted open, and there's just a bunch of sand inside of it. And so she starts freaking out. And there's literally like her tongue sticks out of her mouth as she freaks out, and her tongue reads, oh my God. It's rather disturbing, honestly. So she looks at it, it's like, oh my God, what happened? Guards are coming because they've heard the commotion from, of course, the glass shattering. They're like, oh, Stone Cold Steve Austin's here. But she looks at the sand and is like, well, wait a minute. Maybe the sand itself is valuable. That's how it always is with Senku. He's always taking these little fragments and she makes them together into something useful. And so she's like, I guess I really am a citizen of the Kingdom of Science after all now. And so she makes her escape before the guards can arrive with the sand gathered up in her dress. And we cut to the next day, but not before we see the guards looking over stuff. And the guards are all really stupid about it because they're like, it must have broken on its own. But weird tall mustache guy looks in these fragments of the cement, and there's a little shard of the glass bottle left behind. He starts examining it suspiciously. The stuff gets sent over to Senku's team in one of their little rover things. They call them mousemobiles, which if you're gonna call it that, just call it a mousemobile. It's easier. Or it could be Croakswagen. Chris.
Yeah, I know.
Chris.
I remember the Croakswagen. Fucking Croak.
Hated it. So yeah, sparkly sand has been sent over to them, and so Senku realizes it's gold dust.
I'm glad we both did that instinctively.
Now both of us look stupid instead of only one of us and the other like being like, oh, I can't believe I'm your friend. Yeah, anyway, so Senku realizes that Byakuya must have gathered it up with everyone, just gathering it from like the riverbeds and stuff. And because he remembers that Rory mentioned that there was gold and platinum in there, so it's like, all right, yeah. So there's some stuff in here that we can need. We've got to find some platinum. He manages to find a little tiny pellet of platinum, and they're like, and so Suika's like, oh, okay, if they came from the riverbeds, then I'm gonna go find more. And Senku's like, no, you don't understand. Platinum is obscenely rare. A single ton of the Earth's crust will only yield about 0.001 grams of it. That is how rare it is. But even this tiny amount is very helpful to us. I mean, this could have taken a decade to come across one. And he realizes as he's gathering more and more tiny little bits of platinum up, how much there is. And Gen's like, this must have taken decades to get. And we get a flashback that shows, in addition to all the other shit that Byakuya was doing to ensure humanity would be able to pass stuff on to Senku so they could get them back running up again, he was gathering this stuff up for his entire life, just scrounging the riverbeds, panning for gold and platinum and other precious metals. And he explains to some people that, there's this theory that, like, if humanity were wiped out, then rebuilding from scratch would be impossible because all the rare resources that are found at the surface have already been, dug up by humans. So without that initial boost, then civilization wouldn't be able to get anywhere. So that's why it's so important that I do this. And people are like, as he's getting older and struggling to do this every day, why are you going to all this trouble? And Byakuya explains, because I'm Earth's last astronaut, and working towards a future full of science is my job. So it seems, but by this point in the flashback, he's the last one of the expedition that's left alive. He doesn't look quite that old, but well, disease and all that shit probably wiped out everyone else. And also there was that one idiot who capsized the boat when they set off. And so he says, I'll pay all this forward to the next astronaut. And we see intercut between Senku, counting the seconds in his mind. Byakuya was continuing to work, gathering all this metal up just to fit into this one little bottle. And he would tell people, of course, hey, when I die, put this in that big all round thing over there. And eventually, Byakuya, got old and he collapsed in the river. While he's continuing to work, and he says to himself as he falls forward and he's taking his last breaths, he says to himself, how lucky. I fell forward and the water's surface is reflecting the stars. It's no big deal if I'm not the one to gaze upward again. He thinks with his final thoughts, Senku. And then he dies. And there is a brief little moment of, Senku just kind of realizing everything that his father did. And then he's, and again, kind of drives the point home where he just says, while you were counting the seconds in your mind, your father spent decades gathering this sand. How alike the two of you are. Senku just kind of like, is like, yeah, even though we're not related by blood. And Suika says, wait, does that mean he wasn't really your father? And Senku says that all Byakuya would tell me is that I was his good friend's kid. I never found out the particulars, and I didn't care much. Chris, I'm going to make a little prediction here.
Okay.
Senku's dad caused the petrification beam.
Okay.
Because they have alluded to his actual biological father. Therefore, his biological father has to be important now. He's a Shonen Jump protagonist, Chris.
I would love it, but there's a part of me that also remembers how fucking insignificant of a plot point it was that Haruma's dad was never around. Like, it was a quiet, like, sub-storyline that did eventually get addressed, but it was never a big deal. His dad
was good at chess, Chris.
Yeah, it never turned out, like, his dad wasn't, like, fucking Eli Manning or some shit like that, and they're like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. That's why
the New York Giants are so important.
That's why they're the greatest team in all time when you look at just Ice Shield 21. So maybe it's just because we're also dealing with all the Rey from Star Wars bullshit, but I'm also still like, I kind of hope we don't find out who his parent. Like, I hope it's just not a significant thing. Like, exactly as Senku said, where he's like, I don't really know. I never found out particulars, and I didn't really care. Like,
yeah. He then goes on to say, those kinds of things don't matter. And Gen agrees they don't matter at all. Now, they're referring to the fact that Byakuya and Senku are not related by blood, but it also kind of cares, like, who cares who my biological father is? Byakuya was my real dad. It's like, yeah, but why are you bringing up who he is? Anyway, they got some platinum. They got a good amount of it. It's enough almost to fill up a beaker of it. So definitely not an insignificant amount considering how absurdly rare it is. And Senku decides to mark this occasion by saying he's going to whip up the ultimate revival fluid, and he puts the beaker full of platinum dust in his fucking mouth. Handle that more safely, you idiot.
He's like, achoo, crunch. Oh, now I've swallowed broken glass and all the platinum.
Dad, I'm so grateful to you for all that you've done gathering this dust up for me.
Dad, I'm also sorry. I'm a bit of an idiot, it turns out.
Should not have done that. That made my ear pop.
Oh, no. So I already tweeted about this on Twitter, that this is an extremely beautiful chapter that just captures everything that this series and Inagaki manages to do so well, that he manages to get these kind of awe-inspiring moments out. Like, as Byakuya is laying in the river, dying, how he thinks about, oh well, at least I get to look at the stars one more time, in their reflection, and it's fine that I'm not the one who gets to gaze upward, as he thinks so passionately and so confidently about Senku, how he's like, I know Senku is going to do this. Like that kind of trust that exists there and that confidence. It's so welcoming.
Faith.
It's just a great chapter. It's very beautiful seeing like the lengths that Senku's father, that Byakuya, was willing to go through, and like giving it a kind of final closure there. It's extremely nice.
All right. Let's move on to the 7 Deadly Sins.
Let's talk about that. It's going to be chapter 321, The Light. So last time, all of the deadly sins showed up. All of them, Nick. Every single one of them.
Yeah, all 6 of the 7 Deadly Sins are here.
Uh-huh. So, with all the 7 deadly sins there, 6, they're like, hey, Melodius, what are you trying to do? We're going to help you save your brother. We told you going to help out. So Melodius like, no, you got to get out of here. And Bond's like, what, did you come back from purgatory just to commit suicide with the princess? No, you came to live your life with her. And there's like a joke that Gauther's just like, yeah, so like if you fall, we'd have to solve things anyway. And I guess the joke is that he doesn't get that there's a romance between the two of them. I don't know. There's a joke about him being really oblivious, but I was like, he makes a very good point that if you die,
yeah, it's very pragmatic, actually.
We're gonna have to fight him anyway. So, it's we get a whole kind of collage of all the different characters saying things. Like Merlin's like, I've deceived gods before, but I don't really mind trying to kill one either, and everything like that. And they're like, okay, cool. So I'm in your debt. And there is a moment that's kind of nice where Elizabeth's like, you guys like understand where he's coming from. He loves you guys. So he just doesn't want you to get dragged into this. I kind of like that conflict shows up. Like, why didn't you bring us? Like, no, you got to get out of here. Ends with like everyone kind of like happily being like, oh, right. There's like a perfectly understandable reasoning for both sides of this argument.
Right.
I'd rather live together than die alone. So at that time, the Demon Lord starts going into his like WWE Bray Wyatt promo. He's like, I'm death, I'm fear. Endula, turn the light of what remains of your fire into the flames of wrath that will crush my enemy.
John Cena, I will lose to you on the pay-per-view.
I will lose to you on the SmackDown before and the Raw after. But know that the demon still lurks in your mind. He's like, what?
You know what he needs to do in order to succeed, Chris? He needs to be a weird children's show host who then puts on a creepy mask.
Somehow that's worked.
Somehow that's worked infinitely better.
Well, when the storyline's out like, Seth Rollins, you may have gotten the better of me at No Mercy, Unforgiven, and SummerSlam.
But
6 months later, and with the
I'm still booked.
With the sole victory of defeating Heath Slater on a main event.
I am now a 6-time 24/7 champion.
After winning a 5-man battle royale to determine who would face you at the next pay-per-view, lo and behold, Bray Wyatt is still here again, ready to challenge.
It took me having 3 interference spots, but I did it.
It may have taken everyone else eliminating one. All right, so yeah, he takes the pieces of Endula, he makes himself even stronger. And Merlin's like, oh, okay, that's his ability, the ruler. Any attacks that would weaken him. We know this already. He has this ability that anything that would attack him, he can revert it basically to make him stronger instead. And we know that Bond
big shoulders are.
Yeah, and we know that Bond has a way to counter that by giving him something and kind of doing the inverse, or like throwing a Phoenix down on a zombie in Final Fantasy. But he could turn it off at the same time. So Elizabeth fires off his magic, and he's like, ha ha ha, and he turns it on, and like immediately, like she snaps and like makes it evaporate, and then Merlin's attack just goes through and hits him in the face. He's like, "Oh, curses!" But they're like, "Hey, so we're not gonna win this fight this way. Gauther, you need to take the captain to infiltrate his mind and free Zeldris," which is a very good use of everyone's powers. But the Demon Lord's really strong. Like, even Melodius was having trouble handling him alone. So they're like, I don't know how we're going to be able to do this. Like, it's taking everything to hold him back right now. And now we would have to, not only would we lose the captain, but we then have to put even more effort into protecting Gauther and the captain from being attacked. So there's a big moment where the Demon Lord goes to swing his sword, and Melodius looks like he's ready to defend himself. But then there's a swing, and we just see Escanor holding his hand and just blocking the blade. It's high noon, everybody.
Well, not quite high noon, but it's daytime.
It's daytime, indeed.
This chapter really gives the kind of a feel of like it's time for all of your favorite moments from the Seven Deadly Sins. All your favorite techniques are here in one album. Maybe something more dramatic will happen, but it definitely feels like it's just the hits right now. So maybe it'll end that way, honestly. But maybe we'll get something more, dramatic and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for stuff to still happen. I do like Escanor showing up, like we kind of knew he was going to, but it's nice seeing like, oh, I guess here's basically like their trump card now. Like, who can hold off the Demon King for long enough for Gauther to free him? It's like, oh, King and High Noon, I guess, is the best shot they're gonna have.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool thing.
All right, let's move on to the Promised Neverland, chapter 144. Help us. We get a little bit of a flashback with Sanju and Mujika, where they realized that they were being followed, and the only really important thing that comes from this is that, Mujika's like, well, maybe they're not targeting us. And Sanju's like, it's hard to say. Let's wait and see. If they're pursuers, I'll do what I always do. I'll kill them instead. And then we catch up to the point where he has Jin held at his spear point. And he's just like, hey, if you leave right now, I'll let you live. And Hayato reacts, and immediately goes like, "Oh no, Jin!" And immediately Aishi, who he had, taken prisoner, just face plants him into the ground. You idiot! Jin then also sees a bunch of the Lambda guys collapse, and Sanju reassures everyone, saying, like, "Nah, it's okay. Yeah." He's just put them to sleep for a little bit. We see that in the instant that he appeared behind Jin, he knocked them all in the back of the neck with the butt of his spear along the way, because he's just that absurdly fast. But, Jin refuses to back down as Soju has him at spear point. He's like, even if I die, I can't give up. And he actually latches his hands around the blade of the spear. And he shouts out to everyone and saying, I don't care if you take me out too, just kill him. And all of the Lambda soldiers come rushing in. Aishi shouts out a warning, saying that they're irregulars. Sonju has to dodge out of the way from some of the attacks. And he just says, I don't care what you guys are. If you lay a hand on Mujika, I'll beat you to a bloody pulp. And one of the Lambda soldiers goes, blah, blah, blah. And then they all grab their heads and start spasming and collapse. And so it's just like, what? What just happened? And Jin and Hayato realize that they are suffering from seizures, and Mujika rushes into action right away. She starts tending to one of them, clutching his head, and she says, one of them's not breathing, I need my herb pouch. And so just like, Mujika, what are you doing? But Sanju says they're humans. If we don't act now, it'll be too late. And she starts trying to tend to them, and Hayato makes a decision and says we've got to get them their medicine because it's a seizure specific to people from Lambda. And he begs Jin, come on, we're not going to be able to do this. We've got to get them their medicine. Let's surrender. And they do so. We just cut ahead to later after they've been treated. All the Lambda soldiers plus Jin and Hayato are on their knees bound, with Sanju looking over them. And Mujika is speaking with Dawn and Gilda and Aishi. And we get this brief explanation from Dawn and Gilda. They it's an interesting shot of just the two of them talking to her, and they're surrounded by flashback images to say like, this is what you have missed to this point, kind of thing. And Mujika asks at the end of it what the Imperial capital, because that's where Norman is headed. And Gilda is about to continue the story, but then she realizes, oh, Norman was going to kill them. And I get the impression as they go through this realization, as they remember all the stuff that Norman told them, and saying, "Oh, I want you to find and protect them." She realizes everything was a lie. Norman's only decision from the beginning was to make the demons go extinct. He had no intention of waiting for Emma. He was going to kill them, and she starts crying. I get the impression as she goes through this that Dawn and Gilda knew what was going on, but were in denial over it. Because we saw them when Norman first started saying this and they were suspicious of him. I get the impression that they just really did not want to believe that their very good friend would turn out to be a murderer. So, Gilda apologizes for everything, for her brother essentially doing this, for him being a genocidal warmonger. And she says, "I want to stop Norman. Please help all of us." We cut to Norman's base, and Ray is talking to himself. The only audience worthwhile of being spoken to.
Who else would I speak to? There is no intellectual equal to the Ray.
Oh, hi, Emma.
Oh, what's up?
So he recaps what has happened, and then he's like, so that's all the information you wanted to know. Were you able to make a new promise? And Emma's there. She's gotten back as well. And Emma's like, yay, and everyone can escape to the human world. No one will be killed or pursued. And everyone's like, yay! And Ray's like, okay, what about the reward? Oh, you don't get that one, Ray. Oh, no, I always get a reward. Bing, #Ray. But he asks about the reward that Leah demanded. And Emma's like, that was okay, too. I'll tell you later. And Ray's like, okay. Anyway, this definitely isn't something to be concerned about, Chris. It's fine.
That's where Emma's like, don't worry about it, Ray. And then Ray just gets closed up in a jar. She's like, I'm sorry, the reward was you. And he's like, I wanted to see this #Ray. 20 minutes later. Take it back. Take it back. You give the promise. Take it back.
No,
Holy shit.
Your reward can't be refused.
No.
No take backs.
Fuck.
They end up in the human world, and Ray's like, and now to celebrate by playing Fortnite. No, my account's been hacked. No.
Why? There's no reason to keep going.
All of my gold rewards, or whatever they're called.
I had so many pinatas, I think. I don't really know what Fortnite currency is. I played it when it wasn't the Battle Royale mode. Now
I'll have to give him my throne to Ninja. Does Ninja play this game? I don't know.
Is Marshmallow a dude who plays it?
Anyway. With Mujika and the kid and Dawn and Gilda, Mujika agrees that they'll go to the Imperial capital as well. And Gilda's like, wait, what? But you've been running away. And Mujika's like, no, come on, let's go. I want to prevent the war, and we're friends. And she says, also, it'd be interesting to go to the Imperial. And Sunju says, it'd be interesting to go to the Imperial capital right now. So let's go. And basically everyone is heading to the Imperial capital now. Norman's group, of course, is on their way already. All of the demon lords are on their way. Emma and Ray are setting off from Norman's base as well. And then, of course, Sunju and Mujika with Dawn, Gilda, and Aishi are on their way. So all of the groups are coming together. It seems as though Promised Neverland is starting to get close to its big finish now. So all the pieces are heading towards the big climactic confrontation.
It's going to be very exciting.
As for this chapter, there's a lot of just kind of not even exposition, just a bunch of catching up between characters. It was really weird to go from, oh, something's going to happen with Sanju and Mujika with all these people hunting them down to, yeah, they had seizures and they tied them up.
There you
All
go.
right. Okay.
Sanju's super duper cool.
Yep. But I'm sure that the actual confrontation is going to be happening at the Capitol. So, Black Clover.
All right, let's talk about Black Clover, Nick.
Hang on a sec.
Page 214. Dawn.
All right.
So, the elf magic was broken, so all the elf souls are headed back into the afterlife. But wait! Rades is like, the fuck you do, boy? And he uses his soul abductor magic to take the soul of Patry and bring it back down into the realm of the living and place it back inside his clone body. He's like, hey, you don't get to go back into the afterlife. You have to make up for all the things that you did. You know? So, duh, there. And he did it, basically. So he brought Patry back, and I was like, you know what?
Now,
this is kind of interesting.
this is a two-sided issue for me. For one thing, it is going from, it's like, and now everyone is saying to the afterlife, goodbye, goodbye. And then he goes, no, not you specifically. But there are a couple of different moments that follow up from this that I like, which we'll get to. And also there is just the general idea of, well, Patry now has to actually deal with the fallout, the consequences of his actions. He was misled when he did these things, but he did choose to do a lot of awful things, and now he has to live with the things that he did. And there is no getting out of facing the consequences for what he did.
There's not really a character in Black Clover who kind of has to deal with the fact that they've done kind of horrible things. Everyone's a pretty innocent, noble character all the way through, except a couple of like the nobles, and we really haven't had to see them pay ramifications for what they do. Right. We just assume they don't also but punch
Chris,
the
Noelle's siblings love her now that she's good at magic.
Yeah. And that's the lesson we should learn. But no, it's interesting because you're like, oh, Patry killed the Wizard King. Like, he changed irrevocably the way that this kingdom is going to go moving forward.
Yeah,
so
they talk about this chapter like, oh, someone's going to have to be the new Wizard King. We're going to have to make changes.
It's going to be a lot of interesting stuff. So, I think it's pretty exciting because we got some really interesting stuff to deal with there. We do see that Rhea, whatever the other two are like, so
she still doesn't have a top, by the way.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, come on, they've been here for like 20 minutes. Someone has a coat. That's ridiculous. I mean, we could see Rhea actually right there has a coat. He could easily just give it to her, but hey, might as well leave her topless. There is a very sweet moment though where we see William actually get to embrace Patry, and for somebody whose soul has been kind of like entwined with Patry all this time, the two of them actually get to touch one another and exist in the same world together.
Make out.
Very nice thing. Yeah, you know what? Look, there's going to be some doujinshi about that.
Honestly, I'll be honest. This does actually really help to redeem the whole Patry thing for me. Seeing this moment of William just like, this is you're my closest friend, and now I can actually physically touch you. You're actually here, and we can talk to each other. So it's cool. Yeah. Anyway.
It's very nice. Patry says, like, hey, I know this is a selfish request, but I want you to take me to Master Julius. Actually, I think it might be William. Yeah, William's saying that. So they're like, yeah, we got to go see the grave of the Wizard King. So everyone's like, well, the long fight's over. We see a bunch of people using their magic to kind of help restore and repair things. There's a moment then where like Mosa's healing Asta, and he's like, why does it hurt? And I'm like, because you're an idiot. You're just an idiot when you do this sort of stuff. So Noelle asks who Secre and Lumiere are because they're right there, and he's like, I think Asta's just like, oh, he's the first actual Wizard King. You woke up by magic. I'm going to be a fantastic wizard just like you. I don't know if anyone ever told these things. I think he's just assuming them. And he's right. But I don't know if anyone actually ever told him these things or if he just figured it out himself. And he turns to Sakurai and he's like, "You're never right." And
Your dress is really small. Would you like some pants?
I feel really concerned. Your legs must be cold.
None of the girls around here wear pants. They must be cold. That one girl wasn't wearing a top. All you girls are gonna get frostbite.
It's really cold out. He's like, "I always figured you were an awesome bird. You can turn into a human now. That's so cool." And she's like, "I didn't turn into a human. I was a human to begin with."
What?
He's like, "Why didn't you say so sooner?" She's like, "I couldn't speak until the Shadow Palace appeared. Anyway, you like being the prince, right? So don't be impudent." So she starts pincing him. Noelle's like, "Oh, that spiteful, adorable Nero is... Oh, actually, she's adorable this way, too." Basically, Lumiere's like, "So, you know, the Wizard King is just a word. You and your friends have shown me that the ideals we've aspired to in this era live on as well. So it's going to be really cool to see which one of you guys will be the new Wizard King." And he starts cracking and falling apart. He's like, "Yep, the magic that's holding this body together won't hang around any longer." They throw a note in there that Mimosa's like, "My magic won't help here." I'm like, "Oh shit, he's made of stone." But it's for the people out there who'd be like, "Can't you heal him? He's a stone boy." And Lumiere is just like...
No, because that would require that, what's her fucking name? Charlotte's lieutenant?
Oh, Mars?
Yeah. That would require her to do something.
Yeah.
Can't have...
Yeah, I mean... You make a good point. There are people who have the ability to repair stone. And 100%. If you just told me that Sakurai used her power to seal more life force inside of you, I'd be like... Makes as much sense as every other application of her power to this point.
Or get, Painty McDeerface to do something.
Oh, yeah. He's like, "I painted
Paint him a new body. Yeah.
You know what? Saint, not to cut ahead, but considering what happens at the end of this, I won't be surprised
Might
if
as
that
well.
happens next week. So he's like, "Hey, Sakurai, maybe you're Nero now. Would you continue watching over their futures for me as well?" And she's like, "No, like if you're going to go, I'll go too." And he's like, "No, I gave everything I had 5,000 years ago. I should have ended then, but it was thanks to you I was able to protect the future. And that's enough. So I don't want you to let go of your own potential. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's futures here and both of the Magic Knights and the Clover Kingdom you defend. It's been an honor to see my own descendants. I couldn't be more satisfied." And Sakurai and Lumiere embrace each other's hands. She's, thanks him for being able to serve him all this time. It made me very happy. He's like, "You made me very happy as well. Thank you for all you've done." As he then fades away to dust.
It was nice to see a moment with a Wizard King showing this level of appreciation for someone of a lower class like this, because we made the whole thing with Zora and be like, "I respect him," which is why I did nothing to seeing this guy being like, we saw that these two grew close, but it's nice to have this final farewell between them where he's just like, his final moments are spent not even showing this romantic interest, just saying "Thank you for all that you did for me," and then they say goodbye and he fades away and that's it. It's actually really nice.
It's a very great send off to the character, and it's a very sweet way to kind of send him off as well too.
Yeah.
So we cut over.
Pity that the previous Wizard King didn't have such a great send off, but oh well. I mean, I guess this is what we're doing.
Hey, we had to kind of deal with his death, and we'll be dealing with the ramifications of it to come. Yeah. So Yami
for two more pages.
Yeah, Yami walks over and leads them over to where the Wizard King's body was, and he's like, "It's gone." And they're like, "But I know it was here. This magic, it's..." And then a figure starts to emerge from the forest. It is like, "Good grief, what a disgrace I was. I'm sorry. Well, don't worry, though. I stored up time. About 13 years worth, I think. I wasn't sure whether it would activate properly, though, or not. It was a real gamble. And who should emerge but a 13-year-old Julius Kronos, the former Wizard King. He's alive, Nick. Because why wouldn't he be? Why wouldn't he be alive? Isn't it a surprise?"
God. This is fucking stupid. I had that kind of moment where, like, if this had been a physical book I was reading, I would have thrown it at the wall when I read this. I was so angry.
It's like, but Nick, the Clover Kingdom is full of so many powerful wizards. We have a new story that's
Yeah,
going to be coming.
imagine all the possibilities. Maybe one of the captains is going to have to take over. Think of the possibilities there. Maybe people will want Yami to take over because he's so powerful, and he'll of course want to refuse that responsibility. Maybe we'll see Fuego Leon move on to take up that position so that Mario Leona can still be the captain of the Lions. Maybe it'll be like, hey, maybe fucking they'll talk about the top brigade member was led by William Vengeance, and he's like, no, I can't take that on. I betrayed the Clover Kingdom essentially. Maybe there'll be a whole discussion over all this that they'll have to do, and then it's just like, oh, Wizard King's back. He's alive. Which was the last remaining thing of consequence that happened in this entire arc. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like, oh, no one grew or anything, no one changed my experience. Obviously, some of that stuff happened, but there was a goddamn war between a race involving a race of people that had been genocided out of existence, coming back to possess people in order to get their revenge and take over, and asked to stab a tree with a sword. They all went away. Everyone who's possessed came back except for the people who possessed bodies that didn't have souls in them. So even they don't die. The characters that we knew beforehand are still around now. So that didn't suffer any consequences. Then we get the thing where Patrick's sticking around because he was the only character that we knew beyond this. And then there's the fucking Wizard King who... him dying was the only thing of note that happened in this entire arc. It was the main thing. And also, Patri being around meant that you would have had to deal with that. Imagine all the stuff that would have happened would be like, hey, it's that asshole who killed the Wizard King. And now Judas is like, no, I'm fine. It's no big deal. There's no point in being invested in anything in this series. Like, this is ridiculous. This is the point where it's like, now that I've gotten the initial anger out of the way, a day or so after I read this, I was just like, I don't even care anymore. I just don't give a shit. I remember when we talked about Fairy Tail a few years ago. It reached a point when I was catching up for the big episode that we did about that, where I was just like, yeah, it's stupid. I don't care. So none of it really gets me angry, except for particularly dumb moments. But in terms of like stuff having no narrative consequence, all the same stuff happening over and over again. Yeah, fine. That's Black Clover. Who gives a shit about anything that happens if you're going to kill a major supporting character and then immediately just be like, no, it's fine. Like, there's no point in being invested in anything. There's no point in feeling that any character is ever going to be in danger over anything because it just comes back with magic because magic can do anything. Magic can resurrect the dead. It can turn back time, all this other stuff. So why should you believe, even from an in-universe perspective, that anything has permanent consequences? Anyone can heal up from anything. Asta had the whole thing where he had to get blood magic done to him. And it's like, well, apparently there's all sorts of stuff that can do that. There's someone who can turn back time with the threads of fate. There's someone who can turn back time with a billion different techniques. There's someone who can put stuff into dead bodies. And there's all this other alternate world magic that can do anything. So why do you have to believe that anything has consequence? Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, you basically explained it. It's like, this is the only series I think that's ever done a war arc, and the cast has grown larger as a result of it. Like, nobody died, and they just added like 4 new characters into the roster. Like, the only character who actually died was introduced in the last 2 arcs or 2 months of the series. And
he had no name. He was the devil. That was all he was.
Oh, I was referring to Lumiere.
Oh,
we were introduced to Lumiere
years ago.
Yeah. And then he died again. Yeah, I don't like, because here's the other thing that has me right now. What's next? Like, legitimately, I'm not saying this to try to like be like a gotcha. I'm legitimately curious. Outside of the fact that there is a devil inside of Asta, I don't know what the series does after this because there's no real like lingering plot threads. Like the mystery of the Golden Sun Captain's done. They've already handled all the other kingdoms at this point.
Well, they handled the Diamond Kingdom. We haven't
But
seen anything for the Spade and Heart Kingdoms, I guess.
but
Kingdom Hearts!
but even if they go after those kingdoms, where's the threat? Because the Clover Kingdom is stacked from head to toe with super heavyweights. It's just a list of characters here. Like, I don't know how anyone stops these guys. Like, I'm legitimately curious. Like, they either have to time skip, which actually I'm not opposed to. If there's a big time skip after this chapter, like 3 years or just shit like that, it honestly might be the best thing this series could do.
All the girls' clothing gets even shorter.
I'm like, I don't understand why that would be, whatever. All right. Or you have to go really small. Like, you have to pull back completely, and it's like, oh, we have to find out more about the dwarf. I guess that's the only other thing, the dwarf thing. Maybe that's what they get to. But I'm like, there's no, like, other lingering thing, because everything else was put into this arc. And the big, like, change consequence from it is there are 4 new characters in the world, and the Wizard King is now 13 years old.
Well, there was all the stuff that was established that there is like this other world that magic pulls from that's got all these possibilities attached to it. There's the thing where, we don't really know necessarily exactly where Yami's from. They could explore like another continent. There's the other kingdoms that they could deal with. It's a fantasy series. They'll find something to do. And I don't really think it's going to be like, oh, it's going to go up against a brick wall. It'll go along as long as.
I don't think it's that. It's just one of those things where it's like.
In terms of like stuff that's been heavily foreshadowed, yeah. I mean, we've kind of wrapped up a lot of stuff. Yes.
I'm like, even when the big giant fucking war arc started, not the big war arc, but the invasion of what's the town in fucking Naruto?
Konoha.
Once that like big invasion started with like the Sand Kingdom. We still started to get like hints of like Akatsuki, and we were starting to kind of figure out little details about what was going on in the future. Like, there's always been like little stuff that you can kind of tease at and pull at, and here I feel like we just had to kind of create something completely new, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it just like the series hasn't been running that long, so it's like, I don't know. I think I'm just like kind of curious what you even do from here, because.
Yeah.
Fuck, you could just put Finn at the end of this chapter. I'd be like, yeah, it makes just as much sense.
And then the Wizard King came back. The end.
The end. I was like, yeah, I mean, might as well, right? And there's like a fucking like 80s movie, like shake, rattle, and roll. And it's just a picture of Asta, and it freeze frames. It says Asta and continue to be rivals for the Wizard King. They persisted no longer on food.
Asta yelled, did a lot of push-ups, didn't understand all the girls that had the hots for him, and said he was going to be the Wizard King. Said he was going to be the Wizard King, and then
the two of them no longer
stood there looking pretty otherwise.
The two of them no longer persisted on food or water, but solely off of one another telling each other they were going to be the new Wizard King.
All right, let's wrap things up with One Piece. Chapter 950, A Soldier's Dream. So things are kind of calming down a little bit in this chapter after everything's been wrapped up in the prison because of, Luffy getting the prisoners to properly riot and join him, kind of. We see that there's a little bit of actually stuff that's got to be wrapped up there. For example, Eustace Kid has been freed now. And he uses his devil fruit ability to get a bunch of metal together to make a huge-ass hand, breaks down a wall, and he leaves along with Killer. And he says, let's go get our people back. And he thinks to himself, I'm sick of the Alliance. I don't trust anyone. And he thinks to himself also that, hey, consider it a gift that I don't kill you right here when referring to Luffy. So Luffy, of course, was weak after everything. He's like, yeah, I'll do you a favor and not kill you right here. So... Speaking of Luffy, it turns out having a mummy plague virus, you can't just be a shonen hero and tough your way through it. It does have effects on you. He just put on a brave front in front of everybody, and he's got to be taken care of. And of course, Chopper is getting his medicine out, trying to take care of him. I love that, the kids are there. It turns out them sneaking into the prison didn't really have any consequences at all. they did that so that this next thing can happen. But yeah, so Otama and Momo are there, and Otama's is saying like, "Oh man, it was really dangerous. So sorry that all this happened, big bro, but I'm glad to see you're all right." And Momo's just like, "No, he's not. He's dying.
He's
He is
absolutely
shriveling
not
up
all
right
right.
now." Which might be my favorite thing that he has ever said, actually. um, And he says, it's like, God, Luffy might be stupid, but he's truly extraordinary. I never could have done something like that. And Luffy's like, yeah, well, that's because you're stupid and cowardly and weak and a chicken and totally helpless. He's like 8, Luffy. Leave him alone. But Otama's like, hey, come here. And she actually like shoves him out in front of the crowd because she knows that they're actually waiting to be addressed by him because he's the person that they need to see. And sure enough, as soon as he appears in front of them, and he's totally unprepared for it, people like start crying. They get on their knees in front of him, bow down, and they're all like, so happy to see that he's alive. And Momo's like thinks to himself like, the thing that they're seeing right now is not actually me. They're actually seeing my father. They're seeing the great shadow cast by the Kozuki clan. But he feels a lot of pressure in this instance, obviously. So he tries to address them. Obviously, he's very, very nervous, but of course everyone wants to hear what he says. We see a little bit of playing between Kawamatsu and Raizo. Then we cut away from there to oh god, was it what's the big samurai's name? Ashitaka? Is that it?
Asarai Dabo or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is.
He has led Kinemon and Dogstorm to a massive graveyard, and he explains to them that obviously they were told, and the legend was that the Kozuki clan would return after 20 years, but 10 years was as far as we could get. They couldn't take it any longer, and they headed to Onigashima, and they all died. And we see a flashback of him trying to convince everyone, look, we've got to wait for Kinemon and the others. They'll have Lord Momonosuke with them. We've just got to wait. And everyone's like, we're all older now after 10 years. If we wait to the full 20, we'll be even older and weaker. How can you keep on telling us to wait? We can't follow Orochi anymore. We've got nothing to eat. We're going to die of illness before we ever even get to step onto the battlefield. And, all this stuff that's happened, Kaido's army has broken our wells, burned our fields. We can't wait any longer. And he kept on telling them, like, no, you're going to throw your lives away. And they're like, we're going to throw our lives away anyway if we have to wait this long. At least let me die with a katana in my hand. If I'm going to die, might as well be as a samurai. So don't try and stop us. And they talk about how, much energy they had when they were boys, when they could actually do that. And he's like, how can we, we've just become cowards who take no risks. And so they're like, leap before you look. Remember our abbreviation of surrender your name and be as a child, Sunachi, which I'm sure that makes more sense in Japanese, along with a lot of the abbreviations we've seen. This is like platinum all over again from Dr. Stone. But anyway, it's at least a very inventive slogan that they came up with in order to.
I think a lot of work went into like trying to make this make sense, so I appreciate it.
So, even as they all sailed off to go into battle, he was calling for them to come back. You're going to die. And sure enough, they all died. And in the present, he's just like, why did it have to be a whole 20 years? And Dogstorm says, we will know when the job is done. And Kinemon agrees there must be a meaning to it all. So after all of that, he agrees to help them and says that in 8 days, the night of the Fire Festival, the mission to raid Onigashima and take the heads of Kaido the pirate and Shogun Orochi. Join us if you have what it takes. And all the remaining men under him as, like a bandit leader agree. And so he's in now. And he says, you're still the way you were back then, Kinemon. We might have been the same age once, but now we're 20 years stronger. And he kind of brags along with Dogstorm, but it's a little bit awkward because he like embraces Dogstorm and he's like, eat that rat, dog.
Doggy.
Meanwhile, outside the flower capital, Zoro is still looking after Komurasaki, defending her whenever fricking ninja to come to try and assassinate her. Just, get that guy down, get that guy down. And she's like, sorry for being a burden. And he's like, don't worry about it. If I let you die, I'd have to answer to Momonosuke. And he's, 8. And, oh no. Yeah. He's still, of course, missing his third sword, which was stolen. So he's got to get that shit back. And he's like, I've got to do that because the weight on my waist isn't right. And also, he wants to avenge Tonoyasu's death because it had an impact on him. Komurasaki says that she wishes that she could kill Orochi herself. And then finally we cut over to the Flower Capital, where Basil Hawkins has Law prisoner. And he's trying to get information out of him regarding what they're planning to do. And Law is there in sea stone cuffs, looking pretty smug, honestly, for a guy who's about to get the shit beaten out of him. So, and that's the chapter. There's a lot of more moving pieces around that happens in this after we had a month or so of action and stuff happening. So,
yeah, no, it's super good though. We have a lot of cool things happening. We have, I think, a particularly really good sort of story that happens inside the actual prison, and in this moment, it's a short story, but it's one of those really good short stories about the men from Curry who all decided they were we can't wait any longer, we're going to go, but they do so with pride, and it's absolutely 100% guarantee there's going to be a moment where a character does a cool victory, and they do this is
Tsunachi.
Yeah, this is Luffy ringing the golden bell at the end of Skypiea kind of moment. This I feel is the setup there. So I like these kinds of things. It's really interesting, and I think this is a really solid chapter overall.
It's fine. I definitely really like the flashback the most out of everything in this, and I kind of wish more had been dedicated to it because it's just kind of a note amongst a bunch of other notes that happen in this chapter, when it feels like more should have been dedicated to it, because it's, examining the consequences of this, playing the long game of 20 years is a long time to have to wait for something. And they're all making really strong points we're getting older and weaker and we're suffering and we're going to die anyway. So we might as well just, go die in a way that we can have pride in. And so, and it's a shame. And it really does go to lengths to explain why, this resentment that Ashura feels to the people who traveled through time and kind of left him to deal with the real world ramifications of that. He had to watch a bunch of his friends die pointlessly because of it. And all the rest of it is just kind of stuff that happens. But that's going to do it for Weekly Manga Recap this week, guys. We want to thank you for joining us for Weekly Manga Recap. We record the show on twitch.tv/RoloT, smashcast.tv/RoloT, Wednesdays, generally around 7:30, 8 p.m. Eastern Time-ish. But to stay updated on that stuff and to know exactly when we're going to start the show, you can follow us on Twitter. At WMR Podcast is the official podcast account. At RoloT, at Nick F. Time are your two hosts. If you would like to listen to more of our show, you can go to a bunch of different places. There is iTunes, there is weeklymangarecap.podbean.com, YouTube, all that stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Help the algorithm, help us beat the woodworkers and become kings of the hobby section. You can also join the Discord server. There's a lot of stuff that you can do on there, including check out the Google Doc maintained by Ninja X3i, which has stuff like recommendations, the one that we're currently working on, recommendations that other people have nominated that you can also chime in on and say, I also want to see that. So you can see past recommendations we've worked on, and you can vote for year-end supplemental rewards and stuff that we might mention on the show at the end of the year. And yeah, yes, all that. Special thanks to Infamous Planet, to Wensleydale Cheddar, to fucking Steve, man. I'm kind of tired right now for some reason. Everyone who helps us make the show what it is. Thank you very much.
Milo Stilts and Wensleydale Cheddar, yep. Who have made the animation that you guys should be seeing very soon if you haven't already. when videos go up. By the way, we didn't do our MVPs.
Oh yeah. See, I told you I'm tired. Let's do that. Yeah.
We'll do this real quick so Nick can get some sleep. My character of the week is Byakuya from Dr. Stone, and in return, my series of the week is Dr. Stone.
I have picked Byakuya as well, but I have gone with Samurai 8 because it definitely stepped up its game this week. So
there you go. And the audience picked Byakuya as well, but they went with My Hero Academia as their series.
It's also good. It's also a good chapter. All right. That's going to do it for Weekly Manga Recap, everybody. Now, we have given you bread, given you peanut butter, and we've given you jelly. Did we give you a peanut butter jelly sandwich, though?
That's the philosophical question you guys are going to have to answer. Come back with us next time.
Bye.
Have some low energy.
Bye.
Goodbye. Like, you're staring into the camera with the weight of like Oppenheimer after he like just developed the atomic bomb and saw its use. What have I done?
Now we are all assholes.